June 4, 1943, Norfolk Naval Base, Virginia. Lieutenant Herman Butcher gripped the ship's railing as he stepped down the gangplank, his legs shaky after 14 days crossing the Atlantic. Through the morning haze, he saw something that contradicted 3 years of Nazi propaganda. American dockworkers, both white and black, worked side by side with machinery that seemed decades ahead. Women in coveralls operated cranes. Children sold newspapers near the gates. No one panicked at the sight of enemy uniforms. "These Americans are insane," he muttered to the man behind him. Butcher later chronicled this moment in his memoir Behind Barbed Wire, published in Germany in 1952, one of the most detailed records of POW life in America. The Norfolk base stretched across 4,300 acres, its docks seemingly endless, cranes loading and unloading dozens of ships simultaneously. In a single morning, this one port handled more cargo than Hamburg did in a typical week. But it wasn't the scale that stunned the prisoners, it was the ordinary rhythm of life. Civilians moved freely near military zones. Vendors sold coffee and donuts within view of warships. A brass band played popular music at a nearby war bond rally. 2,500 veterans of the Africa Corps stood in formation on American soil, the first major group of what would become 425,000 German POWs held in the U.S. by war's end. What they would see in the coming months went beyond tales of American abundance. They would encounter something far more bewildering to a military mind, a nation at war that refused to behave like one, a society so confident in its strength that it treated mortal enemies as unwelcome guests, and a people whose unusual customs and inexplicable habits would challenge Nazi ideology more deeply than any battlefield defeat. Processing at Norfolk began with what Butcher later called the first impossibility. German military doctrine, practiced from Poland to France to Africa, held that prisoners were either assets to exploit or burdens to minimize, with the Geneva Convention honored only when convenient. Yet American officers read the Geneva rules fluently in German, explained rights, and inquired about dietary needs. According to International Red Cross records from June 1943, Jewish American personnel, including sergeants with recognizably Jewish surnames, distributed Red Cross packages while ensuring kosher meals were available. Several Wehrmacht soldiers laughed nervously, thinking it a joke. It wasn't. The U.S. military had prepared for the religious requirements of enemy soldiers. Medical inspections defied conventional logic. Wounded German prisoners received the same penicillin that was scarce in German field hospitals. Swiss Red Cross inspector Guy Matrone noted in July 1943, medical treatment given to German POWs equals or surpasses that given to American soldiers. Prisoners expressed disbelief at the quality of care. African American medical staff worked in integrated units at Norfolk, a practice forbidden in Germany. One case involved a black medical technician drawing blood from Wehrmacht officers for routine health checks, standard procedure in America. The most bewildering scene came during their first meal. German POWs were led to a mess hall where American sailors were eating. Enemies who had recently tried to destroy each other at sea shared the same dining facility, Americans at one end, Germans at the other, using the same serving lines, eating the same high-quality food. The Americans paid them little attention, focused instead on a baseball game broadcast on the radio. The 3-day train ride to inland camps added a new layer of disbelief. Unlike the secretive prisoner transports in Germany, U.S. authorities made no attempt to hide the POWs. The trains were passenger coaches with cushioned seats, stopping at stations where civilians observed freely. At Union Station in Washington, D.C., hundreds witnessed German prisoners watching American families send soldiers off to training camps. Wives kissed husbands goodbye, children waved flags, teenagers sipped milkshakes. The same platform hosted enemies and civilians, separated only by windows, with guards more concerned about crowd control than monitoring prisoners. Trains passed through industrial zones that would have been camouflaged in Germany. Factories displayed their names in massive letters. At the Glen L. Martin aircraft plant in Baltimore, parking lots were full of workers' cars, and prisoners could count the B-26 bombers lined up for delivery. No concealment, no paranoia, just American industry operating openly before their eyes. Through Pennsylvania, the trains passed coal mines and steel mills running continuous shifts. Night skies glowed orange from blast furnaces. Worker housing, individual homes with gardens, not barracks, stretched for miles. Every window had lights. Radio antennas sprouted from rooftops. At a stop in Harrisburg, German officers watched American workers at shift change, baffled by a world so efficient, open, and seemingly unconcerned with war. Men carrying lunchboxes, wearing leather shoes and wristwatches, driving personal vehicles. According to Butcher's memoir, one worker threw away a half-eaten apple and opened a fresh one from his lunchbox. The casual waste of food by a laborer stunned officers who had seen their men fight over scraps in Africa. Camp Hearn, Texas, opened in December 1942 on 720 acres near the town of Hearn in Robertson County. Military records show it would house up to 4,800 German prisoners in conditions that exceeded what most had known as civilians. The camp's construction and operation are thoroughly documented in Army Corps of Engineers records and War Department files at the National Archives. The infrastructure itself challenged German understanding of prisoner treatment. Wooden barracks with electric lights, not oil lamps. Indoor plumbing with flush toilets and hot water heaters in each building. Individual beds with mattresses, sheets, and blankets, not straw pallets. Recreation halls with ping-pong tables, musical instruments, and libraries. Swiss inspector Emil Sandstum noted in his August 1943 report, conditions at Camp Hearn exceed not only Geneva Convention requirements, but surpass living conditions many of these men knew in Germany. The camp commander, Lieutenant Colonel Cecile Stiles, whose service record is preserved in military archives, addressed arriving prisoners in German. He had studied the language at university before the war. He explained camp rules, but also something unprecedented. Prisoners would largely govern themselves within the compounds. They would elect spokesmen, organize activities, manage their own schedules within military requirements. Self-governance for enemies seemed like either weakness or a trap. The camp hospital, inspected monthly by the International Red Cross, contained equipment many German civilian hospitals lacked. X-ray machines, surgical suites, dental chairs, pharmaceutical supplies, including the new wonder drug penicillin. When prisoner Georg Gardner, who would become famous as the last P to surrender in 1985, developed appendicitis in September 1943. He received surgery within hours, performed by Captain William Calhoun, an Army surgeon from Dallas, with German P medical staff assisting. But nothing prepared them for the camp canteen, a store where prisoners could purchase goods with scrip earned from voluntary labor. Cigarettes, chocolate, soap, writing materials, musical instruments, art supplies. The War Department authorized these sales documented in Quartermaster Corps records, believing that small comforts would maintain prisoner morale and reduce escape attempts. The idea that enemy prisoners could shop, could choose purchases, could have once beyond survival catered to scrambled military thinking. By September 1943, severe labor shortages led to P employment throughout Texas. The War Manpower Commission, in coordination with the Prost Marshal General's Office, authorized prisoner labor in agriculture and non-military industries. Prisoners earn 80 cents per day in canteen scrip, the same base pay as American privates. Detailed records of these work programs survive in National Archives Record Group 389. At the King Ranch near Kingsville, Texas, German POWs encountered American agriculture on a scale that defied European comprehension. The ranch covered 825,000 acres, larger than the state of Rhode Island. Ranch records from 1943 to 1945 show that German prisoners worked alongside Mexican-American vaqueros and some Negro ranch hands in cattle operations. The racial mixing in work, though limited socially, contradicted Nazi racial hierarchy theories. Prisoners documented their amazement at mechanization in letters that passed military censors. A single combine harvester replaced dozens of workers. Trucks, not horse-drawn wagons, transported crops. The ranch even used aircraft, small civilian planes, to survey cattle herds and spot strays. Ranch foreman Richard Clayburgh Jr. treated German POWs as temporary employees rather than enemies, according to ranch employment records. At cotton gins throughout Texas, including documented operations in Taylor, Caldwell, and Waller counties, POWs witnessed processing speeds impossible by European standards. The Hearn Cotton Oil Mill, which employed P labor from August 1943 to December 1945, processed more cotton in a day than German textile mills handled in a month. Yet workers took regular breaks, ate full lunches, listened to radios while working. Productivity through good treatment rather than harsh discipline contradicted Wehrmacht experience. The prisoners discovered that American farmers discussed politics openly. FBI monitoring reports declassified in the 1970s noted that German POWs were shocked by farmers criticizing Roosevelt freely complaining about government policies without fear. At one documented incident in a farm near Bryan, Texas, a farmer told a Department of Agriculture inspector to go to hell over crop allocation disputes. The farmer faced no consequences. Such defiance of authority would mean death in Nazi Germany. Local newspapers throughout Texas documented German prisoner interactions with American civilians. The Hearn Democrat, Bryan Daily Eagle, and Temple Daily Telegram all ran stories about work details and community interactions. These contemporary accounts provide verification of social encounters that stunned military prisoners. In December 1943, the Hearn Democrat reported German PSWs on supervised Christmas shopping outings, witnessing American teenage culture. Young people gathered at drugstore soda fountains, boys and girls together unchaperoned. They danced to jukebox music, including jazz and swing that Nazi ideology labeled degenerate Negro music. They dressed in fashionable clothes despite wartime, showing no militarization of youth culture. American women's behavior particularly stunned the prisoners. Women drove trucks for the Hearn Cotton Oil Mill, operated businesses along Main Street, supervised male workers in defense plants. At nearby Bryan Army Airfield, part of the Women Air Force Service Pilots WP program, female pilots flew military aircraft. Military records confirm WASPs operated from Bryan Field from 1943 to 1944, visible to work details in surrounding areas. Churches throughout Robertson County invited German prisoners to services. Church records from First Baptist Church of Hearn, First Methodist Church, and St. Mary's Catholic Church all document German attendance at services. The December 24, 1943, Hearn Democrat reported, German prisoners attended Christmas Eve services at multiple churches, sitting among congregation members whose sons serve overseas. No incidents reported. By early 1944, the Special Projects Division of the Prost Marshal General's Office had established sophisticated educational operations at Camp Hearn. Declassified records from Record Group 389 reveal the extent of the secret re-education program, though prisoners only knew it as voluntary education. The camp library, initially stocked with 500 books donated by Hearn citizens, grew to over 5,000 volumes by August 1944. The American Library Association's Books for Prisoners program provided texts including works by German authors banned by the Nazis. Thomas Mann's The Magic Mountain, Erich Maria Remarque's All Quiet on the Western Front and works by Jewish authors like Lion Feuerwanger were available. A German could read books that would have meant death to possess in Nazi Germany. Sam Houston State Teachers College, now Sam Houston State University, provided correspondence courses. College records show 340 German PSWs enrolled in courses including English, American history, mathematics, and agricultural science between 1944 to 1945. Professors from the college visited Camp Hearn monthly to conduct lectures and examinations. The camp newspaper situation requires clarification. While Die Ruff was indeed published at Fort Kearny, Rhode Island, Camp Hearn prisoners published their own newspaper called Der Spiegel, The Mirror, not to be confused with the later German news magazine. Copies preserved in the Army Heritage and Education Center show evolution from Nazi propaganda in early 1943 editions to democratic discussions by late 1944. Declassified Special Projects Division documents reveal sophisticated psychological operations. The program identified three categories of prisoners: anti-Nazis, approximately 10%, non-political prisoners, 75%, and ardent Nazis, 15%. Each group received different treatment designed to maximize ideological transformation. Anti-Nazi prisoners identified through careful screening, including analysis of letters, conversations, and reading choices, received additional privileges and education. They became barracks leaders, discussion group moderators, and newspaper editors. Their influence on non-political prisoners was carefully cultivated and monitored. The screening process developed by Army psychologists and German immigrant advisors included subtle tests. Prisoners' reactions to news of German defeats, their book choices from libraries, their participation in educational programs, and their social interactions were all documented. Weekly reports tracked ideological shifts across the camp population. Assistant Executive Officer Major Maxwell Knight, whose papers are preserved at the Hoover Institution, wrote in a November 1944 report. The transformation rate exceeds expectations. Approximately 60% of non-political prisoners show measurable movement toward democratic ideals after 6 months of exposure to American society and targeted education. Working in American facilities exposed PWs to casual abundance that seemed like mockery of German scarcity. At the Alcoa aluminum plant in Rockdale, Texas, where PS handled materials from September 1943 onward, workers discarded more aluminum scrap in a day than German aircraft factories could acquire in a week. Plant records showed German PSWs were assigned to scrap collection, giving them direct exposure to American industrial waste. Food processing plants provided the most psychological shock. At the Stokely Brothers Cannery in Cameron, Texas, verified through Milne County historical records as employing PWs from nearby Camp Hearn, perfectly edible produce was discarded for minor cosmetic flaws. Tomatoes slightly underripe, corn with irregular kernels, beans with minor blemishes, all destroyed while German civilians faced starvation. A letter from P. Corporal Friedrich Müller, preserved in Red Cross archives, stated, "Today we destroyed hundreds of pounds of fruit because it did not meet canning standards. Fruit that would be treasure in Germany is garbage here." The American supervisor apologized to us for the waste, not understanding that he was apologizing for abundance we couldn't imagine. Christmas 1943 at Camp Hearn is extensively documented in local newspapers, Red Cross reports, and military records. The entire town of Hearn, population 2,000, mobilized to ensure enemy prisoners had a proper Christmas celebration. This response to enemies contradicted every expectation of wartime behavior. The Hearn Democrat published a full list of donations on December 23, 1943. Local churches collected 4,800 individual gift packages. Schools contributed handmade cards and decorations. The American Legion Post 164, veterans of World War I who had fought Germans, donated cigarettes, candy, and sports equipment to current German enemies. The Lions Club provided musical instruments. The Garden Club decorated the camp with holly and evergreen boughs. The camp Christmas tree, photographed for the newspaper, stood 30 foot tall on the main compound, decorated with electric lights that burned continuously. Quartermaster records show the camp used more electricity for Christmas decorations than most German villages had for all purposes. Such electrical display would be unthinkable even in peacetime Germany. Local churches performed Christmas concerts in German for the prisoners. The First Methodist Church choir learned German Christmas carols phonetically. Mrs. Sarah Patterson, the choir director whose son was serving in Italy, led the performance. The cognitive dissonance of American mothers singing to enemy soldiers while their sons fought Germans broke several prisoners emotionally. According to Guard reports, the Christmas feast menu preserved in quartermaster records included roast turkey, 1 pound per man, ham, candied sweet potatoes, green beans, cornbread stuffing, cranberry sauce, mince pie, apple pie, ice cream, beer for enlisted men, California wine for officers. The meal totaled approximately 5,000 calories per person. Meanwhile, German civilian rations, when available, provided 1,200 calories daily. Working in Texas exposed German PSWs to American racial dynamics that contradicted both Nazi propaganda and American reputation. The reality documented in military reports and local newspapers was more complex than either narrative suggested. At Camp Hearn, African American soldiers from the 359th Infantry Regiment occasionally performed guard duties. German prisoners of war, indoctrinated by Nazi racial ideology, found themselves taking orders from black Americans. Some prisoners requested transfers rather than serve under African American authority, but the camp administration denied these requests. In a December 1943 report, Lieutenant Colonel Stiles noted, German prisoner objections to Negro guards are recorded and disregarded. Yet the prisoners also observed the contradictions of segregation firsthand. They could dine in Hearn restaurants that refused service to the very soldiers guarding them, and they could attend movie theaters where their guards were restricted to segregated sections. In some situations, enemy combatants enjoyed more social freedoms than black American citizens, a paradox that challenged Nazi ideological certainty. At agricultural work sites documented by the Farm Security Administration, prisoners labored alongside Mexican American and African American workers. The high efficiency of these racially mixed crews, focused on productivity rather than race, contradicted Nazi assumptions that racial purity determined capability. German POWs often found themselves outperformed by black laborers, further eroding their beliefs in racial superiority. 3 well-documented cases illustrate the transformative effect of life in America. Hermann Butcher arrived at Camp Herne in June 1943 as a committed Nazi. His memoir recounts a gradual ideological shift, with the turning point occurring at Christmas 1943, when local citizens gave gifts to enemy prisoners. He reflected, "These people whose sons we had tried to kill gave us gifts. Their kindness was not weakness, but the strength and confidence of victors who understood they had already won not just the war, but the peace that would follow." Butcher later immigrated to the United States in 1953, became a citizen in 1958, and worked as an engineer for General Motors until retirement. Georg Gardner escaped from Camp Deming in New Mexico in September 1945, living under the assumed name Dennis Wiles for 40 years. Instead of leaving the country, he remained in America, married an American woman, raised children, and worked as a tennis instructor in California. He finally surrendered in 1985 for a television documentary, having spent far more of his life in the United States than in Germany. His autobiography, Hitler's Last Soldier in America, illustrates the transformative power of American society. Reinhold Pell left Camp Washington in Illinois in 1945, not due to mistreatment, but out of curiosity about American life. In his memoir, Enemies Are Human, he describes living illegally in Chicago for 7 years, working in bookstores, marrying an American woman, and later voluntarily surrendering in 1953. The FBI investigation confirmed he had committed no crimes beyond illegal entry. He became a citizen in 1959 and later succeeded as a businessman, sponsoring other German immigrants. While experiences of German POWs varied across America's 500-plus camps, common patterns emerged. Camp Alva, Oklahoma, for instance, focused on agricultural training. Department of Agriculture records showed German PS managed a 200-acre demonstration farm using American techniques. Prisoners learned mechanical cultivation, crop rotation, soil conservation, and hybrid seed development. These skills proved invaluable when PWs returned to devastated Germany. The camp's agricultural program was so successful that local farmers hired P-work crews at premium wages, creating competition for prisoner labor. Camp Concordia, Kansas, became renowned for its art program. German prisoners of war created murals that still exist in Stone County Courthouse and several local buildings. The camp orchestra, equipped with instruments donated by Kansas communities, performed concerts for civilian audiences. The Concordia Blade newspaper reviewed these concerts favorably, noting the professional quality of enemy musicians. Art created by prisoners now forms permanent collections in Kansas museums. Camp Trinidad, Colorado, faced unique challenges with winter temperatures reaching -20°F. Quartermaster records show the Army provided German PS with Arctic-grade clothing, insulated barracks, and increased caloric rations, for 1,000 calories daily in winter. Swiss inspector André Poncho noted in February 1944, German prisoners at Trinidad received better winter provisions than Wehrmacht troops on the Eastern Front, according to prisoners' own admissions. Perhaps nothing stunned German military minds more than American information transparency. Prisoners had access to American newspapers that criticized the war effort, revealed production problems, discussed strategic failures. The Special Projects Division deliberately provided diverse news sources, knowing that exposure to free press would undermine totalitarian thinking. Radio programs accessible in recreation halls featured commentary critical of military leadership. Comedians like Bob Hope mocked generals and politicians. Journalists like Edward R. Murrow questioned strategies. Congress debated military appropriations publicly with dissenting opinions broadcast nationally. All of this was accessible to enemy prisoners. The 1944 presidential election campaign observed from camps seemed like democratic suicide to German military minds. Roosevelt faced serious challenge from Thomas Dewey during wartime. Republicans criticized war management. Newspapers published opposition views. Political cartoons mocked the commander-in-chief. Yet the war effort continued, even strengthened. This demonstration of democracy's strength through discord rather than despite it fundamentally challenged authoritarian assumptions. International Red Cross inspection reports available in ICRC archives in Geneva consistently rated American P camps above Geneva Convention requirements. These neutral assessments provide crucial verification of camp conditions. Inspector Guy Metro wrote in his August 1944 comprehensive report, American camps exceed treaty requirements in all categories. Food rations equal or surpass American military rations. Medical care is equivalent to American military hospitals. Educational and recreational opportunities exceed many American military training facilities. Specific inspection findings from Camp Hearn include caloric intake 3,300 to 3,800 calories daily. Geneva Convention required 2,000. Living space 40 feet per man. Convention required 27. Medical staff 1 doctor per 500 prisoners. Convention required 1 per 1,000. Recreation, organized sports, libraries, educational programs. Convention required adequate recreation. Inspector Emil Sandstom compared American camps favorably to other nations. Having inspected P facilities in Canada, Britain, and Australia, I can state definitively that American camps provide superior conditions. The distinction is not just material, but philosophical. Americans treat prisoners as temporarily displaced persons rather than enemies. PS working in American factories observed production methods that revolutionized their understanding of industrial efficiency. At the Lanier Steel plant in Dangerfield, Texas, where PS from Camp Hearn worked from 1944 to 1945, monthly production exceeded the entire Ruhr Valley's annual output before Allied bombing. The secret wasn't just machinery, but motivation. Company records show workers competed for production bonuses, suggested efficiency improvements, took pride in output. Charts displayed each shift's production like sports scores. Workers wore company pins, bought war bonds with overtime pay, painted bomber names on steel designated for military use. Morale drove productivity more than supervision. At Texas railroad yards, where PWS loaded materials, the coordination astounded German logistics officers. The Missouri-Kansas-Texas Railroad employed PWs at its Smithville yard, where prisoners witnessed American logistics efficiency. Trains arrived on precise schedules. Loading equipment operated continuously. Telegraph and telephone systems coordinated nationwide transport. No central planning committee, just capitalism organizing itself for war production. As Germany collapsed in spring 1945, American authorities prepared prisoners for return to a destroyed homeland. This preparation documented in occupation planning records exceeded simple repatriation. The War Department initiated Project Paperclip for scientists, but also broader programs preparing PSWs to rebuild democratic Germany. Courses in civil administration prepared PSWs for managing destroyed cities. Agricultural training emphasized feeding starving populations. Medical personnel learned public health techniques for epidemic prevention. Engineers studied infrastructure reconstruction. The Special Projects Division identified potential democratic leaders among prisoners, providing additional training in governance and administration. The scope of preparation is documented in Prost Marshal General Reports. By May 1945, 31,000 prisoners of war enrolled in vocational training, 18,000 studying English, 12,000 in agricultural programs, 8,500 in technical courses, 6,200 in business administration. Future Marshall Plan concepts were explained to prisoners before public announcement. State Department officials visited camps explaining American intentions to rebuild rather than punish Germany. This incomprehensible generosity from victor to vanquished shattered final remnants of Nazi ideology about racial struggle and survival of the fittest. The numbers document the transformation's scope. Of 425,000 German PS in America, only 2,222 escape attempts occurred. 0.52%. Only 54 successful escapes for more than 30 days, 0.01%. Sabotage incidents, 7 confirmed cases, 0.001%. Work refusals, 178 documented incidents, 0.04%. Voluntary labor participation, 87% of eligible prisoners. Post-war surveys conducted by American occupation authorities found 74% of returned PSWs held favorable views of American democracy. 61% supported Marshall Plan aid when announced. 55% advocated German-American alliance. 38% expressed desire to immigrate to America. 23% maintained correspondence with American families. Immigration records show 5,000 former PWs legally immigrated to America in the 1950s. Naturalization records indicate 92% became citizens within eligible time frame. Their American success rate measured by employment, home ownership, and lack of criminal records exceeded general immigrant populations. The influence of returned PWS on West German Reconstruction is documented in occupation records and German archives. Former PWs occupied significant positions in the new democracy. 48 became Bundestag members. 312 served as mayors or city councilors. 1,847 worked in agricultural modernization. 2,341 taught in reconstituted schools. 4,165 managed businesses using American methods. Hans-Georg von Studnitz, former P and later German industrialist, told American historians in 1965, "We returned from America with more than memories. We brought knowledge of how democracy functions, how free markets operate, how diverse peoples cooperate. We had seen the future and we knew it worked." Camp Hearn closed in December 1945, but connections endured. The Hearn Heritage League maintains archives of correspondence from former PWs spanning 40 years. Christmas cards arrived annually until the last known prisoner died in 2001. These letters document sustained transformation rather than temporary influence. In 1984, the 40th anniversary of D-Day, 50 former Camp Hearn PWS returned to Texas. The Hearn Democrat provided extensive coverage of the reunion. Former adversaries warmly greeted their former guards. Wehrmacht veterans laid flowers at the American Legion Memorial. Fritz Zimmermann, speaking on behalf of the group, reflected, "We arrived as enemies, convinced of racial superiority and national destiny. We departed as friends, realizing that the seeming disorder of democracy is its strength, and that diversity builds rather than diminishes unity." Scholars have thoroughly examined the experience of German prisoners in the United States. Arnold Kramer's Nazi Prisoners of War in America, 1979, offers detailed documentation. Judith Gansberg's Stalag USA, 1977, explores the re-education efforts. Antonio Thompson's Men in German Uniform, 2010, analyzes POW labor programs. And Ron Robbins' The Barbed Wire College, 1995, chronicles educational transformation. These studies, drawing on archives, interviews, and official records, confirm the profound impact and success of the process. The consensus is clear: the treatment of German POWs in America represents one of history's most effective forms of re-education, achieved through exposure rather than indoctrination. Prisoners arriving between 1943 and 1946 encountered realities that seemed impossible to their former worldview. Each act of casual freedom, small kindness, and unexpected generosity accumulated to reshape their ideology. They had anticipated a fractured, weak nation but instead encountered a society so secure it could extend mercy to its enemies. The transformation did not rely on propaganda but on lived experience. German POWs observed democracy functioning amid apparent chaos, racial integration progressing despite segregation, and women exercising authority while maintaining dignity. They saw former enemies turn into friends through simple acts of humanity. These sights, ordinary to Americans but revolutionary to those shaped by totalitarianism, achieved what battlefield defeat alone could not: a complete ideological transformation. POWs did not merely witness American power, they engaged with American values. They did not only observe democracy, they participated in it. America's greatest triumph was not fought on the battlefield but realized in prison camps, where opponents became allies simply by experiencing American life. What astonished them was only unusual through the lens of tyranny. To Americans, it was daily life, imperfect, messy, yet free. German POWs arrived expecting foes, but instead encountered reflections of what they might become. These extraordinary encounters reshaped not only individual prisoners but the course of nations. Within their astonished observations lay the foundations for the Atlantic Alliance, the Marshall Plan, and Europe's democratic reconstruction. Their transformation demonstrates that the most enduring victories are sometimes won not through destruction but demonstration, not through propaganda but reality, and not through cruelty but through humanity. The exceptional experiences German POWs had in America became the cornerstone of one of history's most remarkable transitions from enemy to ally.